She asked him to bury her. He gave her a reason to live. It was a quiet evening when she found herself walking alone through the empty streets. The sky was painted with the soft shades of twilight, the kind of light that made everything look calm and peaceful. But inside her, there was no peace at all. She felt a heavy emptiness, a weight pressing on her chest that seemed impossible to lift. Life had been unkind to her, more unkind than she could ever explain to anyone. Every day felt like a battle she was slowly losing, and the people around her seemed unaware of how fragile she had become. She had learned to hide her pain with smiles, to keep her struggles locked away where no one could see them. To the world, she was capable, cheerful, even strong. But that was only the mask she wore. Behind it, there was loneliness, fear, and sorrow that no one could reach. Some nights she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why life had made things so hard. Why did she always feel like she was carrying a burden too heavy to bear? And yet, she kept moving forward, even when her heart screamed to stop. That evening, the weight of her despair felt heavier than ever. She had come to a point where she didn't see a way out. She felt trapped in her own mind, like she was walking through a thick fog that wouldn't lift. The past haunted her, the mistakes, the losses, the times she had tried and failed. There were people who had disappointed her, and there were people she had let down herself. It was a constant cycle of sadness that seemed impossible to escape. She had tried to talk to friends, but their words often felt hollow. They didn't understand the depth of what she was feeling, and she didn't blame them. How could anyone? As she walked, she thought about all the times she had felt invisible. Even in crowded rooms, she could feel the isolation. Even with people who said they cared, she often felt misunderstood, like a stranger looking in from the outside. It wasn't that she wanted attention. It was that she wanted to be understood, to be truly seen for who she was. And when she realized that maybe that would never happen, a cold thought crossed her mind. A thought she had tried to ignore for a long time. Maybe it would be easier if she just stopped trying, if she just let everything end. She didn't act on the thought immediately. Instead, she wandered aimlessly, as if the streets themselves might offer some answer. She passed the old park where she used to sit as a child, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. Memories flooded back, happier times, times when life had seemed simpler, when laughter came easily. She remembered the days she had felt safe and loved, and the contrast made her current pain feel even sharper. She realized that part of her was still holding on to those memories, still craving that sense of peace she had once known. But it felt so far away now, almost like a dream she could no longer reach. As she walked, she saw a man sitting on a bench reading quietly. He was someone she had known casually, someone who had always been kind in their brief encounters. She didn't know why she chose to approach him that night. Maybe it was because she needed to speak to someone, anyone, who might listen without judgment. Or maybe it was because deep down she wanted to test if anyone really cared. She hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding, and then she walked up to him. She spoke in a quiet, calm voice, one that betrayed none of the storm inside her. "If something ever happens to me, I want you to bury me," she said. The words were shocking, even to her own ears. They came out softly, almost as if she were repeating a sentence she had rehearsed in her mind for years. But she didn't feel dramatic or angry. She felt empty. She felt like this was the only way she could make sense of the hopelessness that had taken over her life. The man looked up, startled. He didn't know what to say at first. The weight of her words sank in slowly, making him realize how much pain she must have been carrying. She wasn't joking. She wasn't seeking attention. She was simply telling the truth of how hopeless she felt. For a moment, the street seemed to grow quieter around them, as if the world itself had paused to hear the confession of a broken heart. Instead of reacting with fear, confusion, or even anger, he chose to remain calm. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the vulnerability she had been hiding from the world. He could see the layers of sadness behind her eyes, the exhaustion in her posture, the way her voice held both surrender and a silent plea for help. And in that moment, he understood something important. She wasn't asking for death out of malice. She was asking because she didn't know how to keep living. She needed someone to reach through the darkness, and maybe, just maybe, he could be that person. He didn't answer her immediately. He stayed silent, letting her words settle between them. And then, gently, he asked if she wanted to talk. She nodded. She hadn't expected to, but suddenly she felt a small spark of relief. She wanted someone to hear her story without judging her, without trying to fix her instantly. She wanted someone to just be there, and so she began to speak. She spoke about the years of loneliness, the disappointments, the times she had felt invisible. She told him about her family struggles, her failed attempts at friendships, and the silent battles she fought every day. She spoke about the weight of her own expectations, the pressure she put on herself to be strong, to never falter. With every word, a little of the burden she had carried alone for so long began to lift. For the first time in years, she felt that someone was truly listening. The man didn't interrupt. He didn't offer cliches or quick fixes. He simply listened, nodded, and sometimes asked small questions to let her keep talking. He made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. And as she spoke, she began to notice a subtle shift inside herself. Speaking out loud made her pain feel less heavy. Sharing her story made her feel, for the first time in a long while, like she wasn't entirely invisible. That night stretched on, and the streetlights cast a warm glow over the empty park. She talked, he listened, and a quiet connection formed between them. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was simple, human, and real. She realized that maybe, just maybe, there was someone in the world who cared enough to not let her give up. She didn't feel completely healed, not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long time she felt seen. She felt a faint, fragile spark of hope, and in that small, quiet moment, something shifted. A tiny seed of possibility planted itself in the dark soil of her heart. It was fragile, almost invisible, but it was there. She had asked him to bury her, and yet by simply listening and being present, he had begun to give her a reason to stay. It was not a complete solution, not a miracle, but it was enough to keep her moving, enough to remind her that she didn't have to face her struggles alone. By the time the night ended, she didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what the future held, or how she would cope with the challenges ahead. But she felt a new sense of possibility. She had spoken her truth, and someone had truly heard her. She had taken a step, however small, toward life again. And sometimes she realized that first step was the most important one of all. The woman walked home slowly, her mind still heavy but her heart slightly lighter. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe life could hold something better than just pain. And she knew deep down that the man on that park bench had given her something priceless. The knowledge that even in the darkest moments someone could care, someone could see her, and maybe, just maybe, there was still a reason to keep going. The next morning she woke up feeling an unusual mix of confusion and relief. The heaviness she carried the night before hadn't vanished, but something inside her had shifted. She remembered her words, the ones she had spoken so quietly in the park, asking him to bury her. And she remembered his face, calm and attentive, as he had listened without judgment. For the first time in years, she realized that someone had truly heard her. That thought stayed with her, quietly encouraging her as she moved through her day. She didn't expect to see him again, and yet, somehow, she found herself thinking about the man on the bench. His kindness had been simple, almost ordinary, but it had meant everything. In her mind, she replayed their conversation, the way he had asked questions that made her think, the way he had nodded when she spoke, the way he had just been present. It was not a dramatic moment, but it had made her feel seen in a way she had forgotten was possible. That feeling was strange and new, but it gave her hope. Just a tiny flicker, yet enough to make her heart pause and wonder if life could offer more. Later that day, she found herself walking past the same park. She didn't plan to go there, but her feet seemed to carry her naturally. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was a desire to feel that sense of understanding again. And there he was, sitting on the same bench, reading quietly as if nothing had happened. She felt a small hesitation, a nervous flutter in her chest. Approaching him was not easy. Her past experiences had taught her to be cautious, to protect herself. But something inside her, a fragile sense of trust, urged her to speak to him again. When she reached the bench, he looked up and smiled gently. There was no judgment in his eyes, no expectation, only calm presence. It was a simple smile, yet it carried warmth and safety. She returned the smile softly, unsure of what to say. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was quiet but comfortable, filled with the kind of silence that does not demand conversation yet offers companionship. Finally, she broke the silence. I didn't know anyone could really listen like that, she said. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if speaking might shatter the fragile connection that had formed. Most people, they hear me, but they don't really listen. They don't understand. He nodded slowly. I can't say I understand everything you feel, he said gently. No one can, but I can listen. I can be here while you talk, without judging or telling you what to do. Sometimes that's all a person needs. Hearing that, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. Simple words, simple intentions, but they carried more weight than anything anyone had said to her in years. She realized that for the first time in a long while she didn't have to pretend. She didn't have to hide the pain that had taken root in her heart. She could speak it aloud, and someone would not only hear it but care about it. She began sharing her thoughts and feelings in small doses at first. She talked about the loneliness that had followed her since childhood, the feeling of always being on the outside looking in. She spoke about her family, her struggles with their expectations, the disappointment she felt when she failed to meet their hopes. She shared memories of friends who had left, relationships that had ended painfully, and moments of deep shame she had buried for years. With every word, she felt the invisible weight she carried begin to lift slightly, like a dark cloud parting to let in a ray of sunlight. The man didn't interrupt. He didn't give advice or try to fix her. He simply listened, allowing her to express herself without fear of judgment. When she paused, he asked gentle questions that encouraged her to explore her feelings more deeply. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, her fears, her hopes. He asked questions that made her reflect, not to push her, but to help her understand herself better. Each question was like a small spark, illuminating the dark corners of her mind that she had avoided for so long. As the days passed, she found herself returning to the park again and again. Each visit she talked more openly, revealing parts of herself she had hidden even from herself. The man remained patient and consistent, never forcing conversation but always present, offering a safe space where she could be honest. Slowly, a quiet trust grew between them. She began to see that he was not there to judge her past, to shame her mistakes, or to criticize her struggles. He was there simply to be a steady presence, a reminder that someone cared. Through their conversations, she began to notice small changes within herself. She laughed more easily, sometimes at little jokes he made, sometimes at the absurdities of life she had long ignored. She smiled at moments she might have walked past before without noticing. She began to take small steps to care for herself, drinking a little more water, taking short walks, even noticing the beauty in the world around her. These were minor things, almost imperceptible, yet each one marked progress. She realized that healing did not have to be dramatic. Sometimes, healing came quietly, in small, gentle movements forward. One afternoon, as they sat on the bench watching children play in the park, she found herself sharing a secret she had never told anyone. She spoke about the night she had cried alone, the thoughts that had scared her, the moments when she had believed life might not be worth living. It was terrifying to speak these words aloud, to admit how low she had sunk. Yet, he remained calm, never flinching, never showing alarm. His steady presence gave her courage. She realized that acknowledging her pain did not make her weak. It made her human. Over time, she began to understand that her darkest thoughts were not the whole story of who she was. There was still a part of her capable of hope, capable of joy, capable of connection. She had buried that part of herself beneath layers of fear and despair, but with someone who truly listened, she began to uncover it. Each conversation was like turning over a stone in a neglected garden, discovering seeds that had lain dormant for years. Slowly, those seeds began to grow. She also began to notice the power of simple kindness. The man did not offer grand gestures or dramatic reassurances. He did not say, "Everything will be perfect." Instead, he simply showed that he cared, consistently, patiently, and without conditions. His attention was quiet, but unwavering. It reminded her that human connection could be a lifeline. It reminded her that even in the midst of despair, it was possible to feel seen, valued, and understood. For the first time in a long while, she began to dream again. Not big, impossible dreams, but small, attainable ones. She imagined walking through a quiet street without fear, smiling at a stranger, or enjoying a cup of tea without rushing through life. These small visions were simple, yet they carried profound meaning for her. They represented a shift in perspective, a gradual realization that life could hold beauty even amid struggle. There were setbacks, of course. Some days, the darkness returned stronger than before. Some days she felt the weight of her past pressing down on her chest, threatening to undo all the progress she had made. But each time, she remembered that he was there, not to judge, but to support. He reminded her gently that healing was a process, not a race. He showed her that setbacks did not erase progress, and that taking care of oneself was not selfish. It was necessary. Slowly, she began to take responsibility for small parts of her life. She began to write in a journal, noting moments of gratitude or small accomplishments. She started to talk to a few trusted friends about her feelings, testing the waters of vulnerability. She learned that sharing her struggles did not weaken her. It allowed her to feel human. Each small action reinforced the lesson she had begun to internalize, that her life mattered, that her voice mattered, and that she had a right to live fully, even with scars. By the end of several weeks, the woman realized that something remarkable had happened. The hopelessness that had seemed permanent had begun to fade, replaced by cautious optimism. She did not feel completely healed. There were still moments of pain and fear, but she had begun to reclaim her sense of agency, her ability to make choices, and her hope for the future. The man who had once simply listened on a park bench had become a steady presence in her life, a reminder that she was not alone, and that even in her darkest moments, someone cared enough to stay. And so the woman learned a vital truth. Healing begins when someone listens without judgment, when presence is valued over solutions, and when patience and consistency offer a lifeline. She had asked him to bury her, but instead he gave her the chance to live, to feel, to hope, and to rediscover herself. That simple act of listening became a turning point, planting the seeds of a life she had once thought was beyond her reach. It was the start of a journey, one she would walk step by step, guided by the quiet but powerful knowledge that she was seen, heard, and valued. Life had begun to feel slightly different for her. The heaviness that had once dominated her every thought hadn't disappeared, but it no longer controlled her completely. She had realized that the darkness could be softened, even in the smallest ways, by simple human connection. The man who had listened to her in the park had not given her dramatic advice, had not told her everything would be perfect, and had not claimed to have all the answers. Instead, he offered something even more powerful: his presence. It was quiet, steady, and unwavering. He reminded her that she mattered. She started noticing small changes in herself. For the first time in years, she could walk down the street without feeling invisible. When she passed people in the market or on the bus, she occasionally smiled, and sometimes they smiled back. These small interactions, which once would have gone unnoticed by her, now felt meaningful. It was as if she had been living in black and white for years, and suddenly, the world had begun to show faint colors. These colors were subtle: a child laughing, the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of the sun on her skin, but they carried immense power. They reminded her that life, despite its challenges, still had small joys. The man continued to be a quiet anchor in her life. He did not push her to talk or reveal everything at once. He simply stayed present, checking on her regularly and offering small acts of care that slowly helped her trust again. He remembered her favorite coffee from a small cafe and would bring it when they met, Sometimes he sent a text asking how her day was going, not to pry, but simply to let her know someone cared. These gestures were small, yet they spoke volumes. They reminded her that she was not alone, and that her life was worth attention. One afternoon he suggested a walk through the park, just the two of them. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to leave her apartment and face the outside world. But something in his calm, patient tone encouraged her to try. As they walked together, she felt the tension in her shoulders slowly ease. He didn't rush her, didn't fill the silence with meaningless chatter. Instead, they walked side by side, letting the quiet rhythm of their steps speak for itself. She began to feel a sense of comfort in his presence, a feeling she had not experienced in years. During these walks, he would occasionally ask questions that made her reflect. He didn't ask about her pain directly, but about simple things, what she liked about the park, her favorite memories from childhood, or what small goals she wanted to achieve that week. These questions seemed ordinary, but they had extraordinary effects. They reminded her that her life had value, that her thoughts and feelings mattered, and that she could still make choices for herself. The act of thinking about herself, of imagining small possibilities, was a revelation. At home, she began to take small steps toward self-care. She started keeping a journal, writing down her thoughts, feelings, and tiny victories. Some days she wrote only a few sentences. On other days, she poured out pages of emotions. Writing became a safe space where she could process the pain she had carried for so long. It was not always easy. Some days, the memories and feelings overwhelmed her. But even on those days, she felt that she had an outlet, a way to release what she could not speak aloud. The journal became her private companion, helping her navigate the complicated journey of healing. She also began noticing her own strengths. Before, she had only seen herself as fragile and weak, defined by her pain and past failures. But through her conversations with him, she realized that enduring so many difficult years had required courage. Living through loss, disappointment, and loneliness had not been easy, and yet here she was, still moving forward. Each small step, whether it was leaving her apartment, walking in the park, or sharing her thoughts with someone, was a demonstration of resilience she had forgotten she possessed. The man helped her celebrate these small victories, never in a loud or exaggerated way, but with simple recognition. When she shared something she had accomplished, even something minor like finishing a short task she had been avoiding, he acknowledged it with genuine warmth. "I see how hard you're trying," he would say, and those words meant more than any grand praise could. They reminded her that progress was valuable, even if it seemed small or slow. And slowly she began to internalize that idea herself. One day, as they sat on a bench watching the world go by, she opened up about her dreams, not the distant, impossible ones, but small, achievable hopes she had buried under fear. She spoke about wanting to reconnect with old friends, to take short trips, or to learn something new. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included joy, exploration, and connection. He listened patiently, encouraging her gently. He did not make promises. He simply validated her aspirations, showing her that dreaming was not a foolish act, but a necessary part of living. Their interactions became a kind of steady rhythm in her life. Some days were hard, and she would struggle with anxiety or sadness. Other days were lighter, filled with small moments of laughter or curiosity. And every day he was there, not as a solution, but as a reminder that someone cared, that she mattered, and that life still held potential. It was a quiet, understated support system, but it was enough to keep her moving forward. Over time, she began to notice that her relationships with other people were also changing. She found herself more willing to reach out to friends or family, to accept invitations, or simply to smile at strangers. She realized that trust could be rebuilt slowly, through consistent small acts of kindness. And each time she allowed herself to be vulnerable, she discovered a new layer of strength within her. She had been carrying the weight of isolation for so long, but she now understood the connection was possible, and that it could be healing. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, she reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the day she had asked him to bury her, the moment when despair had seemed absolute. It was hard to believe that she had reached this point, where she could sit in a park, watching the world, and feel hope. She realized that hope had not returned magically. It had come gradually, through small, consistent acts of care, through listening, through patience, and through the understanding that she did not have to face life alone. She also realized something important about herself, that her pain did not define her. She had once believed that her struggles made her weak, that her sadness was a permanent mark on her life. But she now understood that experiencing pain, acknowledging it, and continuing to move forward required courage. Every day she chose to get up, to speak, to connect, to care for herself. These were acts of bravery, and each act, however small, was a step toward reclaiming her life. In the weeks that followed, she began to take small risks. She started volunteering at a local community center, helping others in need. At first, it was difficult. She worried about being judged or feeling inadequate. But as she engaged with others, she discovered that giving her time and energy brought her a sense of fulfillment she had long forgotten. She realized that helping others also helped her heal, creating a circle of kindness and connection that strengthened her resolve. Through all of this, the man remained a steady presence. He did not need to be dramatic or heroic. His quiet support was enough. He had given her the gift of seeing her worth, the freedom to express herself without fear, and the courage to take small steps toward life. By simply listening, by simply caring, he had created the foundation for her healing. And slowly she began to see that her life, which had once felt like a burden, could be full of purpose and meaning. By the end of this part of her journey, she realized that healing was not about instant change or dramatic transformations. It was about consistency, presence, and small, meaningful actions. Each day, each conversation, each act of care had built a bridge from despair to hope, and she understood that this bridge, though fragile and imperfect, was strong enough to carry her forward. She had asked him to bury her, but he had given her something far greater, the chance to live, to heal, and to rediscover herself. Even though she had made progress, the journey was far from over. Life was still filled with moments that tested her courage and resilience. Some days the weight of her past returned with full force, threatening to pull her back into despair. Old memories and regrets would surface uninvited, reminding her of the times she had felt invisible, unloved, and hopeless. These moments were terrifying, because they made her doubt all the progress she had made. She feared that one misstep could undo everything, and send her back to the darkness she had once wanted to escape. Yet each time the darkness returned, she remembered the man who had quietly stayed by her side. She remembered how he had listened without judgment, how he had shown her that she mattered simply by being present. That memory became a small anchor, reminding her that she was not alone, and that she had the strength to face her fears. She realized that healing was not about forgetting the past, but about learning to move forward despite it. Every time she confronted her fears, she built a little more confidence in herself, slowly reclaiming the life she had once thought lost. One evening, she found herself walking through the streets of the city, her mind heavy with anxious thoughts. She was nervous about a social gathering she had promised to attend, worried that she might feel overwhelmed or judged. She felt the familiar panic rising in her chest, the urge to retreat into solitude. But then she remembered a simple truth he had once told her. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to move forward, even when you're afraid. Those words resonated deeply, and she decided to try. She walked to the gathering, step by step, reminding herself that she had survived difficult moments before and could do so again. At the gathering, she struggled at first. The room was noisy, full of strangers, and her old fears whispered that she did not belong. But she noticed something remarkable. She was able to take small steps to stay present. She greeted a few people, exchanged polite smiles, and even managed to join in a light conversation. Each small action felt monumental. She realized that she was practicing courage, not by conquering fear all at once, but by facing it in manageable pieces. By the end of the evening, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had challenged herself, and she had survived. The man continued to be her source of guidance, not through commands or advice, but through gentle support and reminders of her strength. He encouraged her to set small, realistic goals and celebrated her successes with her, no matter how minor they seemed. "Look at what you've done," he would say. "Even small steps are proof that you are moving forward." And slowly she began to internalize this mindset. She understood that healing was a process, not a destination, and that each day offered an opportunity to grow stronger, even if progress was slow. She also learned the importance of confronting the sources of her past pain. She started reconnecting with family members she had distanced herself from, taking careful steps to communicate her feelings. It was difficult, often uncomfortable, and sometimes emotionally draining. She encountered misunderstandings and resistance, but each interaction gave her valuable lessons in patience, empathy, and self-respect. She realized that facing the people and situations she had once avoided was a necessary part of reclaiming her life. Avoiding her past had given her temporary comfort, but confronting it allowed her to grow and heal. Through these experiences, she also began exploring activities that nurtured her sense of self. She took up hobbies she had abandoned, like painting and writing, allowing herself to express emotions that had long been suppressed. These creative outlets became a safe space where she could release tension, explore her inner thoughts, and rediscover parts of herself she had forgotten. Each painting, each written word, became a small triumph, a reminder that she was capable of creating, feeling, and living fully. At the same time, she began volunteering at a local shelter, helping people who faced challenges of their own. Initially, she was nervous, worried that she might feel overwhelmed by the suffering she would witness. But as she interacted with others, she realized that her experiences gave her a unique empathy. She could listen to others with genuine understanding because she had walked through darkness herself. Helping others became a source of healing for her, reinforcing the idea that her life could be meaningful and impactful. Through these acts, she discovered a sense of purpose she had long forgotten. Of course, there were setbacks. Some days she would find herself slipping into old patterns of negative thinking, replaying past mistakes or doubting her worth. On those days, the man's support became crucial. He would remind her gently that progress was not linear and that setbacks were natural. He never made her feel guilty or weak for struggling. Instead, he encouraged her to accept her feelings, to take a deep breath, and to try again. His patience and understanding became a model for how she could treat herself with compassion, even during difficult moments. One particularly difficult afternoon, she faced a memory that had haunted her for years. A betrayal by someone she had trusted deeply. The pain had never fully healed, and she found herself reliving the moment, feeling the sting of disappointment all over again. She felt a wave of despair rising, threatening to overwhelm her. But then she remembered the small lessons she had been learning, that she had survived before, that she had grown stronger, and that she was not alone. She called him, and simply speaking to someone who cared helped her process the emotions. She realized that facing pain with support did not make her weak. It made her resilient. Over time, she began noticing a transformation in how she viewed herself. She no longer saw herself as fragile or broken, defined solely by her struggles. Instead, she recognized her courage, her empathy, and her resilience. She had learned to set boundaries, to speak her mind, and to acknowledge her needs without guilt. She discovered that life did not have to be perfect to be meaningful, and that she could find joy even amid challenges. These realizations, though subtle, marked a profound shift in her journey toward healing. She also began forming new friendships, carefully choosing people who were supportive and understanding. She learned the importance of surrounding herself with positivity, while also being patient with those who were not yet ready to understand her. She realized that relationships could be sources of growth, comfort, and joy if nurtured with care and respect. By engaging with others in healthy ways, she discovered the power of connection and the healing that comes from being seen, valued, and understood. Throughout this journey, she reflected often on the night she had asked him to bury her. That moment, once filled with despair, now seemed like a turning point, a moment when someone had chosen to stand by her instead of walking away. She realized that her healing had begun not with dramatic change, but with small acts of care, consistency, and patience. The man had not solved her problems. He had given her the space and support to face them herself. And in doing so, he had helped her discover a strength she had forgotten existed. By the end of this part of her journey, she understood that life would continue to have challenges, and the darkness would sometimes return. But she also knew that she now had tools to face it: patience, resilience, self-care, empathy, and support from someone who truly cared. She had learned to confront fear, to express herself, and to take small steps toward growth. Each action reinforced her belief that life was worth living, and that her story was not defined by despair, but by courage, hope, and determination. And so, she moved forward, step by step, day by day, carrying with her the lessons she had learned. She faced the darkness with newfound confidence, rebuilt her relationships, discovered her passions. She realized that life, while imperfect and challenging, was full of possibilities. And through it all, she remembered the man who had been there when she had asked him to bury her, reminding her, through quiet acts of care and unwavering presence, that she had every reason to live. Time had passed, and she had come a long way from the woman who had once asked him to bury her. The despair that had once consumed her every thought had not disappeared entirely. She knew life would always have challenges, but it no longer had power over her. She had learned to face her fears, confront her past, and embrace the small joys of life. Her journey had been long and difficult, but it had also been filled with growth, self-discovery, and hope. She began to notice the changes in herself in small, everyday ways. She could walk through crowded streets without shrinking inward, could smile at strangers without fear, and could sit quietly in a room full of people without feeling invisible. These simple moments were significant victories. They reminded her that she was no longer defined by her past pain or by the fear that had once ruled her. She realized that living was not about avoiding challenges. It was about facing them with courage, step by step. Her relationship with the man who had helped her remained a constant in her life. He had never sought recognition or reward for his support. He had simply chosen to stay present, to listen, and to care. That quiet dedication had been a lifeline for her. Whenever she felt overwhelmed or uncertain, she could rely on his steady presence. Over time, she had come to understand that his role in her life was not just about saving her from despair. It was about teaching her to find her own strength. He had shown her that she was capable of resilience, hope, and love, even when she could not see it in herself. One afternoon, she sat with him in the park, the same park where their journey had begun. The air was warm, and sunlight filtered gently through the trees. She thought back to that night, the night she had spoken words of hopelessness and had asked him to bury her. At the time, she had felt empty, like her life no longer mattered. But now, she could see how far she had come. She realized that asking for help had been the first courageous step, and that the support she had received had allowed her to reclaim her life. She spoke softly, almost in disbelief at her own words. "I used to think life wasn't worth living. I thought I had nothing to offer and no reason to stay. But now, I see things differently. I can feel hope again. I can feel life." The man smiled gently, not with pride but with quiet affirmation. "You always had that strength inside you," he said. "I just helped you see it." Her transformation was not sudden, and it was not dramatic. It had been gradual, built on countless small steps: walking outside despite fear, expressing her thoughts, reconnecting with family, helping others, and embracing hobbies that brought her joy. Each step, no matter how small, had strengthened her confidence and helped her rediscover herself. She understood now that life's value was not measured by perfection or by the absence of pain, but by the ability to face challenges and continue moving forward. She also began thinking about her future in a way she never had before. She imagined a life where she could continue growing, forming meaningful relationships, and pursuing her passions. She thought about traveling to new places, learning new skills, and contributing to her community in ways that mattered to her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose. Life was no longer a burden she carried alone. It was a canvas, ready for her to fill with color, choice, and possibility. The small acts of kindness she had experienced and later extended to others had changed her perspective deeply. She volunteered regularly, helping people who faced struggles of their own. Each interaction reminded her of the value of human connection, and the power of empathy. Helping others gave her a sense of fulfillment she had never imagined possible. She realized that her experiences, even the painful ones, had given her insight and compassion that could now benefit the world. In that way, her pain had not been wasted. It had become part of her purpose. Even as she embraced hope and growth, she remained aware of her vulnerabilities. There were moments of doubt, days when the shadows of past despair crept back into her thoughts, but she no longer faced them alone. She had learned to acknowledge these feelings without allowing them to control her. She sought support when needed, reflected through journaling, and reminded herself of the progress she had made. Her relationship with the man continued to provide stability, but she had also discovered her own inner resilience. She understood now that she could rely on herself as much as she could rely on the support of others. Over time, her confidence in facing life's challenges grew. She began forming new friendships, carefully choosing people who were kind, understanding, and supportive. She engaged in meaningful conversations, shared laughter, and allowed herself to experience joy without guilt. These relationships became a source of strength, reminding her that she was deserving of love, trust, and companionship. Through connection, she discovered the richness of life beyond isolation and despair. One day she reflected on the path that had brought her here. She realized that the moment she had spoken the words of hopelessness, the moment she had asked him to bury her, was not a moment of weakness, but the beginning of her transformation. Speaking her truth had been an act of courage. It had opened the door to understanding, support, and healing. And through that journey she had learned an invaluable lesson. Sometimes asking for help is the first step toward saving yourself. She now understood the power of presence, patience, and care. The man who had stood by her had not given her easy answers or instant solutions. He had offered something more enduring, the reminder that she mattered. That knowledge had given her the courage to face her fears, embrace her strengths, and pursue a life filled with possibility. His quiet support had been the catalyst, but the change she experienced had come from within. She had learned to live with intention, hope, and resilience. Her life became a balance of self-care, purpose, and meaningful connections. She nurtured her passions, continued to help others, and embraced moments of joy wherever she could find them. She allowed herself to dream, to make mistakes, and to grow from each experience. She realized that life's journey was not about perfection, but about progress, and the courage to keep moving forward even when the path was uncertain. And so, she chose life. She chose to wake up each morning with the intention of making the day meaningful. She chose to face challenges with courage, to express herself honestly, and to pursue growth wherever possible. She chose to connect with others, to share kindness, and to find beauty in the small moments. Most importantly, she chose to believe in herself again. The man remained a steady presence, not because she needed him to save her anymore, but because he had become a true friend. Together they reflected on her journey, the struggles she had overcome, and the hope she had regained. He reminded her that while life would continue to have challenges, she now possessed the tools to navigate them: resilience, empathy, patience, and self-belief. She realized that the woman she had been, the woman who had asked him to bury her, was no longer who she was. She had emerged stronger, wiser, and filled with a renewed sense of purpose. She often returned to the park where their story had begun. Sitting on the same bench, she looked around at the world and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The trees, the sunlight, the laughter of children. All of it felt alive in a way it had not before. She had learned that life was not about avoiding pain, but about embracing it alongside joy, growth, and connection. Every step she had taken, every challenge she had faced, had led her to this moment of clarity. In her heart, she carried a quiet but profound truth. Even in the darkest moments, life could offer hope. Even when despair seemed overwhelming, there were people who could care, listen, and help guide one back to light. And even when the world felt cold or indifferent, one could find warmth, purpose, and meaning within oneself and through connections with others. She had discovered that life, with all its imperfections, was still worth living. The woman who had once asked to be buried had become someone who understood the value of life, the power of compassion, and the strength that comes from facing challenges with courage. She had found her reason to live, not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments of connection, self-discovery, and hope. She had learned that even small steps forward could create monumental change, and that resilience was built one day at a time. Looking back, she smiled softly, remembering the darkness that had once seemed permanent. She now saw that the moment she had asked him to bury her had been a turning point, not an ending. It had marked the beginning of a journey toward healing, self-discovery, and a life filled with purpose and joy. And she knew, with deep certainty, that she would continue moving forward, embracing each day and cherishing the gift of life she had once thought lost. Her choice to live had transformed everything. It had turned despair into hope, isolation into connection, and emptiness into purpose. And with that choice, she stepped confidently into the future, ready to face whatever life had in store, knowing that she was stronger, valued, and capable of living fully.